Your land is now my land. I've already arranged for construction.
What? That land is. As I was about to speak, my mother-in-law interrupted with a shrill voice.
A wife shouldn't talk back to her husband. Just say understood and that's it.
I didn't know how to respond to my mother-in-law, who looked so smug. That piece of land is already leased to a company and a new apartment complex is planned to be built there. The land's rent is expected to be deposited next month. I'm sure I told Bob about this. My mother-in-law about that land.
Like I said, you just need to keep quiet. Got it?
Every time I tried to speak the truth, my mother-in-law would shrilly interrupt. I finally lost my temper. Understood. I muttered curses under my breath as I looked at my satisfied in-laws and husband. Just wait and see. I can't wait to see them regret this. My name is Katherine Johnson. I'm a housewife who just turned 45. I studied abroad for about 2 years in college and have been an instructor at a Japanese conversation school for adults for over 23 years. Every day interacting with my students is very fulfilling. My husband, Bob, is also 45. We met when he enrolled as a student at my Japanese school. I never planned on getting involved with a student, and I always turned him down while he was still enrolled. But even after leaving the school, Bob kept pursuing me, and I finally gave in and we started dating. Bob was very gentlemanly during our dates and our relationship went smoothly. After about 2 years of dating, he proposed, and we got married when I was 30. However, as soon as we got married, Bob changed his attitude completely and became very domineering. At first, we had many arguments, but I didn't have the energy or the spirit to fight every day. Eventually, I gave in most of the time, and it became the norm. Bob has a younger sister named Mary, who's 5 years younger than him. She didn't seem to visit her parents' home often. I met her once, and she seemed like a very efficient woman. But according to Bob, she's arrogant and can't compromise just because she's a woman. Because of this, I hardly had any interactions with Mary, and I only saw her maybe once a year during the holidays. We've been married for 10 years, and even though I'm now 40, Bob and I haven't had any children. I once had a checkup at a women's clinic based on my in-laws' advice, and there was nothing wrong with me. But as soon as I reported that, Bob's face turned livid, and he yelled at me.
You! Are you trying to say it's my fault?
It's not like that. I tried to choose my words carefully, but an enraged Bob didn't listen. He threw the remote controller against the wall beside me.
Don't you get cocky with me. I ain't ever going to a hospital. It's definitely something with you. Change the clinic. Never go to the previous one again. You got it?
Bob said this and, grabbing just his wallet and cell phone, left the house. I picked up the broken remote controller, tears streaming down my face. The married life I had dreamed of wasn't supposed to be like this. Perhaps the reason I didn't choose to divorce was because of the fond memories I had with the kinder side of Bob. At the age of 43, my in-laws told me that having a child at this age would look bad in society, and I had to give up the idea of having kids. When I told Bob about this, he just replied with a simple, "I see," showing no particular concern. It was then that I realized that I was the only one truly bothered by it. Bob and I lived about a 5-minute walk from my in-laws' house, and they would visit us about 3 times a week. To be honest, I wasn't fond of my in-laws. My mother-in-law kept making snide remarks, while my father-in-law would only talk about my looks and our intimate life. You know what they say, right? As women age, their eggs degrade or something. I'm not saying yours are degrading, Catherine. But once you're past 40, there could be complications, right? It'd be a hassle for us too, you know?
It's all good, right? Even if they were degrading, Catherine's still got a fine figure. I bet Bob's still having a good time. Stop it, Dad.
Nobody feels good having such crude conversations in front of them. I silently served tea, hoping that my in-laws would leave soon.
You know, I had Bob when I was 20, and Mary when I was 25. I'm not saying younger is better, but younger women do tend to recover faster after childbirth, right?
You sure were young, my mother-in-law.
Well, not really. I mean, compared to other mothers of Bob's classmates, I might be on the younger side.
I forced a smile at my mother-in-law, who was clearly pleased with just a bit of flattery. My mother-in-law always took pride in having had Bob at a young age, always wanting to show off how she was younger than others her age. And if someone didn't play along or contradicted her, she'd act as if they were in the wrong and treat them coldly. I had to constantly flatter and play along with my mother-in-law's silent assertions whenever we met. Honestly, my mother-in-law's appearance wasn't that great. She was of average height and build, with curly hair, looking like any ordinary older woman you'd come across. She looked closer to 70 than her actual age. Yet, she seemed oblivious or maybe genuinely believed she was a hidden gem.
Well, it's sad that we won't get to see a cute grandchild, but it's better than having another useless mouth to feed. Yeah, if they don't have kids, they'll probably take care of us in the future.
The living room filled with crude remarks was so uncomfortable, even though it was my own home. And after my in-laws had their say, they always left with a sense of satisfaction. One day, I got a call from my father. It was about my paternal grandfather passing away, and that I was set to inherit some of his estate. My father's family home was known as one of the prominent households in that area. My father, being the youngest of 6 siblings, never really inherited anything substantial and chose to live life doing what he wanted. Hence, my immediate family wasn't particularly wealthy. But since I was the only grandchild in the paternal lineage, my grandfather bequeathed a piece of land to me. The inheritance included that land and a sum of money that would cover any related expenses. Even after paying the estate taxes, the amount left was substantial enough to make me pinch myself to check if I was dreaming. However, the plot was too large to simply build a house on, and I didn't have the confidence to use it wisely. I discussed it with my father, and he suggested renting it out to a company looking to construct condos. The lease income alone would be enough to lead a comfortable life without worrying about its maintenance. Since this inheritance was unexpected, and the land didn't hold sentimental value for the family, the decision to lease it to the company was easy. I informed my husband, Bob, about this. Bob seemed deep in thought for a while, but then simply said, "Got it," and went back to reading his book. I thought the matter was settled, but it seemed Bob had other plans in mind, which unexpectedly came to light one day. It happened on a day off when, as usual, my in-laws had invited themselves over to our place. I was cleaning up in the kitchen. Bob suddenly called out to me while enjoying the tea and snacks I had prepared.
"Your land is now my land. I've already arranged for construction."
"What? That land is..." Before I could finish, my mother-in-law interrupted with a sharp voice.
"A wife shouldn't talk back to her husband. Just say understood and that's it."
I was speechless, seeing my mother-in-law's smug face. The land was already leased to a company that was planning to build condos on it. The lease money was to be deposited next month. I had already informed Bob about this. My mother-in-law about that land.
"Like I said, you just need to keep quiet. Got it?"
Every time I tried to speak the truth, my mother-in-law would shrilly interrupt. I finally lost my temper. Understood. Looking at my in-laws and Bob, who were smirking contentedly, I silently cursed them. "You'll see. I can't wait to see the look on your faces when you realize." I decided to act on something I had hesitated to do for a long time. I renewed my long-expired passport and reached out to a friend living abroad. When I told my friend about the situation, she was shocked but agreed to help. It was a bit challenging to carefully execute the plan before Bob found out about the land, but it felt worth it, thinking about my bright future. By the time everything was in place, Bob apparently got a call from a construction company about the land. One day, when I returned from work, Bob was standing at the entrance with a livid expression.
"You deceived me."
From that one phrase, I understood what Bob was talking about. Holding back the urge to break down, I responded. "What are you talking about?" It seemed my words really ticked him off. Shaking with anger, Bob glared at me.
"It's about that land. The construction company called. They can't take on the project because there's another construction plan in place."
"Really? I thought I told you about it."
"What? It's a wife's job to follow what her husband decides, right? Stop the condo construction plan right now. You said you understood."
I was too exhausted from work to deal with his selfishness. Bob grabbed me by the collar, trying to intimidate me. However, I wasn't afraid at all since I had everything prepared. "It's impossible. Because I've already leased that land to a company."
"What?"
"I told you, didn't I? The land is in my name, but the building on it is under the company's name." It's called a ground lease. I get paid for the land, and I don't interfere with the building. I explained it to you, but it seems you didn't get it. Bob seemed to not understand. He let go of me, looking completely dumbfounded. Looking him straight in the eyes, I continued. So, let's get a divorce.
What, huh? How'd it come to this? Are you serious?
Bob finally seemed to pick up on my simmering anger, and he quickly began to panic. Seeing his pitiful state, I moved to the living room. Bob, even though bigger than me, seemed so small as he cautiously followed me, keeping an eye on my every move. Catherine. Look, I'll respect your decision this time, but reconsider the divorce, okay? Despite everything, Bob still had the audacity to look down on me. I shot him a contemptuous glance. Bob seemed genuinely frightened by my gaze.
Why should I need you, of all people, to respect decisions about the property I inherited?
Well.
I mean,
You seem confused.
that land is mine. I inherited it. You have no say in it.
Bob was initially quiet, taking in my words. But the moment he heard he had no rights, he snapped.
Hey! That's downright disrespectful to your husband. Who do you think pays the bills here?
Well, we split all the living expenses and housing costs, so I'm living off my own dime. What?
Didn't you notice? Or did you just not care?
I took out our household ledger and opened it to the current month's page. Bob contributed $1,000, and I also put in $1,000, making it $2,000 for our living expenses. Additionally, the rent for our apartment and utilities come directly from my account. So, even though we say it's 50-50ths, I'm the one paying more. As you can see, I can manage just fine on my own. Actually, it seems like I'm wasting money just by being with you.
That's a lie.
You take more than $2,000 for yourself each month, right? Yet since our marriage, you've only contributed $1,000 to our home. That's 'cause Mom said it was enough.
There it is. Always with the mom thing. You're such a mama's boy. Mama's boy.
Bob seemed taken aback by my words, his eyes widening in surprise. To any onlooker, Bob, who always runs to his mother for everything and expects her to take his side, is clearly a mama's boy. But he seemed utterly clueless about it.
Anyway, if you plan to keep living there, you'll have to pay for it yourself from now on. I've already changed the direct debit account. After today, I won't be paying even a cent.
Wait, what do you mean you're leaving? Ignoring Bob's protests, I grabbed the suitcase I had prepared earlier from the closet and headed for the front door. Actually, I've already moved my stuff out. I had been sneaking it out little by little so he wouldn't notice, but Bob had no clue. It made me a bit sad thinking he wasn't that interested in me, but to be honest, it was quite convenient. Bob followed me to the entrance, so I took off my wedding ring right in front of him and placed it on top of the shoebox. Are you really leaving? You'll regret this.
Staying together would be the real regret.
What about my meals?
What? Make your own food.
I was utterly exasperated that Bob was concerned about his meals at this point. Bob looked like he thought it was a given, but when I snapped back at him, he looked absolutely stunned. I didn't want to see his face for even a second longer, so I left the house I had lived in for 15 years. For the next few days, I was busy preparing for the next chapter in my life, running around handling various errands and paperwork. Then, I received a call from my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, I answered the phone and was met with a shrill voice coming through the cell phone.
What on earth? Building an apartment on that land? And after all I've done, taking care of you and Bob for 15 years without a child, and now you're divorcing him? How ungrateful! My mother-in-law, the apartment was already decided. The divorce is because Bob and I couldn't build trust. And the reason we didn't have children is because Bob didn't fully cooperate with the fertility treatments. He's perfectly healthy.
That's strange, so am I. At my words, my mother-in-law shrieked in frustration on the other end, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the cartoonish way she yelled.
Anyway, I'll be suing you for damages. For deceiving us and for breaking Bob's heart. You better make amends.
All you talk about is Bob.
Give him back his ring and keep clinging to him. As for the damages, I might talk to Bob about that. My lawyer will contact you soon, so don't run off, okay? Pass that message along. What? The nerve of you!
My mother-in-law kept yelling, but I hung up without a second thought. I was amazed at how much a person can say when they finally let go of their inhibitions. It felt as though a weight that had been on my chest for years had finally lifted a bit, giving me a sense of relief. A month after leaving the house, it was finally time to discuss the divorce. My lawyer told me the basic terms were set, but Bob refused to sign the divorce papers unless he saw me. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him at a restaurant. My in-laws insisted on meeting at their home, but I repeatedly refused and booked a private dining room at a restaurant. When I got to the rendezvous, my in-laws and Bob were there, all smiling unnaturally. I had a gut feeling they were up to something.
Catherine, long time no see. How've you been?
Yeah, I've been good, thanks. As I replied, my mother-in-law approached with a grin, speaking in a sweet, cloying voice.
Catherine dear, I'm sorry for the past. Let's talk about the future.
Sounds good. From her words, I got a vague idea of the scheme she and Bob and my in-laws were up to. Probably something like, Bob is gonna divorce, so give us a percentage of the rent money or something. And sure enough, as soon as my mother-in-law sat down, she began talking about the inheritance I'd received.
Do you know the current market value of that land over in, say, New Jersey?
Well, yes.
I was blown away. And you've been getting some money elsewhere too, right? We need to settle the division of assets properly.
I couldn't help but laugh at her brazen words. Seeing me burst into laughter, at first, my mother-in-law looked stunned, but her face quickly turned beet red with anger.
What's so funny?
You don't know, do you? The inheritance I received isn't considered marital property.
What?
My mother-in-law exclaimed in shock, eyes wide open. Apparently, she'd been so blinded by the dollar signs she hadn't done her basic research.
So you're saying we won't get a single cent?
That's right. At my words, my mother-in-law let out a silent scream and slumped in defeat. Judging from my mother-in-law's attire, she had plans to live the high life on my inheritance. Overhearing her mumble about
how to make the payments
was proof enough.
Don't you want to support your husband's family as a good wife should?
My father-in-law, who had been silent until now, interjected, to which I threw him a cold glare. And I silently pressed a button on my smartphone. From it played a recording of my father-in-law's own crude words.
What the? I don't need a father-in-law who talks to me like that, a mother-in-law who goes along with it, or a husband who turns a blind eye. I'm gonna live my own life. You think you can just do whatever you please?
If you want, we can even take this to court. I'll just present this as evidence anyway.
If you do that, it'll ruin me.
Well, it'll be a social disaster for you, wouldn't it? My father-in-law was speechless, and just like my mother-in-law, he hung his head in defeat. Finally, with the noisy peanut gallery silenced, I looked over at Bob. Even though Bob's face had turned pale, he suddenly seemed to have an idea.
I bet managing the money is hard for you alone, so I'll help you out. Okay? Just do whatever you like. I don't understand why I need to involve you in my life even after the divorce. Plus, I have someone who'll genuinely help me decide how to use the inheritance. Come in.
At my beckoning, the door opened and a woman walked in. Bob's eyes widened in shock upon seeing the woman.
Mary!
Long time no see. Turns out, while I was planning with a friend, I discovered that Mary knew that friend. According to what my friend told me, my in-laws always favored Bob and were incredibly hard on Mary. Bob not only accepted the situation where he was the only one benefiting, but he also often shifted the blame for his actions onto Mary, showing his cunning side. In the end, Bob went to a private high school and college, but Mary was only allowed to go to a public high school and didn't get any financial help for college. So, Mary worked to pay her own college fees, and after graduation, she became a freelance writer on her own. But as soon as her career started taking off, my in-laws began pestering her to send money home. This coincided with when Bob and I got married, so I was surprised when I was told she was wary of us too. Since then, Mary and I have been in touch and cleared any misunderstandings. We've become what you could call best friends. Mary and I hit it off really well. She's going to help me start an English language school abroad.
Abroad? What can you possibly do overseas?
Did you forget my profession? I've studied abroad for 2 years and have been speaking Japanese with native speakers at work every day. I have no issue using Japanese, and had I not married you, I would have gone overseas much earlier.
What's gonna happen to me? I can't speak Japanese.
Do you understand what divorce means?
It means I've chosen to not live with you anymore.
Oh. It seemed like Bob finally grasped the situation, his face going from pale to ghostly white. I took the filled-out divorce papers from the silenced Bob, left the three of them sitting there lifelessly, and exited the restaurant with Mary and my attorney. After that, I filed the divorce papers. Then, I moved overseas. I had already sent my belongings to my new place, so I was able to start my new life without any problems. I'm sharing a home with Mary, and we're able to live together while respecting each other's jobs. Mary has been gaining popularity as a freelance writer, penning columns about living abroad and writing articles about America for local publishers. Turns out, Mary's dream is to become a novelist. Seeing her work hard on her stories in her free time, I feel like I need to step up my game. Bob, who used to live with me in our old apartment, apparently had to move out because he didn't have any savings due to his frivolous lifestyle. He couldn't make ends meet. He moved back with my in-laws, but without financial help from Mary, they are taking most of his salary. Not only does he have no discretionary money, but he also seems to be worn out doing all the housework that my mother-in-law gave up on. It seems that my in-laws are also on the verge of having to sell their home. They sent numerous messages to Mary asking for money, but Mary just laughed and said drop dead before hanging up. I think my mother-in-law, who's only 65, should really consider working. But given she's never held a job before, there aren't many places willing to hire her. Moreover, I doubt she'd even choose to work. So, their family home might be gone in the not-so-distant future. As for me, I've opened the English language school I always dreamed of and, thankfully, it's thriving. My students are incredibly passionate, always filled with hope and saying they're gonna visit America someday.
Well, today we're gonna study greetings.
Every day, I stand in front of the class with a smile. I'm brimming with hope for the future and I absolutely love the confident person I've become.